My name is Ryan, and this is a KA24E from a Nissan 240SX. I pulled this motor out of a car with about 70,000 miles, and this is going to be the replacement for my track car engine that I blew up recently. When I pulled this motor out, we did a compression test on it, and 1, 2, and 4 were good, but cylinder 3 had a leak at the exhaust valve. So we're going to tear this whole thing down, get it ready to be rebuilt, and we're going to go over what to look for. We're going to try to figure out what that problem is with the exhaust valve and see if there's any other surprises for us on this engine. So we're going to film the whole thing and have you guys see that A, it's not that hard to do. Anybody can do this in their garage. You can do it with basic hand tools, and we're going to go over the whole process. As you can see, I started tearing some stuff down already a couple of years ago when I first got the engine. So we're missing the power steering pump, we're missing the AC compressor, but generally everything else is still here. So we're going to start by taking all the accessories off, intake manifold off, and strip it down to a bare long block. And then from there we'll go over taking the oil pan off, taking the front cover off, removing the head, and then removing the whole rotating assembly.
So we're going to start with...
I didn't even introduce you.
Who am I? Yeah.
Yeah, we got Aidan behind the camera here. So yeah, we're going to start with the accessories. So this is the power steering bracket. We're going to take that off. We're going to take off the alternator, the water pump. This would be the idler pulley for the power steering. My car has no power steering, so we're going to be getting rid of all of that and just keeping the alternator as far as accessories go. We'll pull the distributor out, and then we will pull the intake manifold off. And it comes off in 2 separate pieces. So you have the plenum and the runners. And essentially we'll strip it down to a bare long block. We're going to start by, it's pretty intuitive as far as accessories go. These are a bunch of 12mm bolts. Take this off. It's going to be some 14s here. Taking this off, and we'll time lapse this and get some clips and things like that. So we'll just start stripping it all down. And you'll start to see as everything comes apart, just the bare engine.
Let's get started.
Doo-doo. The bottom bolt for the alternator has it's essentially just a captive nut. So just be aware of that when you're taking that lower bolt out. You don't want to lose that guy. So a lot of these bits are held on with RTV. Not held on, but they're sealed with it, and it's going to be holding them on once you take the bolts out. So the water pump, I already taken it off, so it wasn't stuck on there. But this thermostat housing, it is stuck on there. Timing cover is going to be the same way. So you might have to beat it off with a rubber mallet. Once you get it off, some gentle prying. You don't want to screw up those surfaces, but you're going to have to do a little bit of convincing to get it off. Look at that. One tap, there it is. So next, distributor. We're going to have 2 14mm bolts. You can get to them with a ratchet and an extension, but you could also just do a wrench. So just 2, one on the top, one on the bottom to lock it down. And there's going to be an O-ring on there, so it might be a little tough to get out, but you just yank it up and out of there, just like that. And then there's the drive from the oil pump, I believe. And so there's your distributor. Motor mount brackets are going to come off. Those are just going to be 14s. And they are labeled. Can you see that? Left and right. You don't have to worry about misplacing them because they are etched left and right.
So we took off some stuff from the motor. There are some important parts here.
We got one of the motor mount brackets off so far, the left side. The right side's kind of buried into there, so we'll just wait until the intake manifold's off to get that, so we don't have to flip the engine over. We got the thermostat housing here. That came off there. We have the power steering pump bracket. Like I said, I already pulled the pump off, and that's in a box somewhere. But that comes off, and you have to take this off before you can get the intake manifold off. You can't get to this bolt right here with this bracket on. Well, you can, but with the pump in there, you can't.
It's a lot easier to take it off. Yeah.
Take it off, get it out of the way. And we're not going to need this anyway for my engine because I don't run power steering in that car. This is the lower alternator bracket. We took that off from right there. 3 14mm bolts. Water pump. Some 12mm bolts. Pretty straightforward. Just like the thermostat housing, you might have to beat it off because the RTV is going to hold it on. The upper alternator bracket that includes the adjuster here, that's bolted on with 2 timing cover bolts. So you want to make sure when you take those bolts out, you put those in a bag for the timing cover so you don't lose them. And then the idler for the power steering pump. Pretty straightforward. Right above the distributor here, a couple 12s. We did take the pulley off just to get better access. You pull that 14mm nut off. You have this little spacer here. There's another spacer underneath that. So just keep track of those as you take this apart. And again, we're not going to need this, so we're going to put that off to the side.
There was an important note about something for the distributor bar.
Distributor.
Yeah, there was like a little bracket you had.
Oh, yeah, for the wiring.
I think it's right here.
When you take off the bracket for the power steering, the idler up here, you have this little guy. Do you need it? Probably not, but it will hold the wiring for your distributor because it has to run across the front of the cylinder head. So if you have it, just hold on to that. You don't really want to lose this guy. So that's really the important note there. Most of this stuff's pretty straightforward. We'll get on to the intake manifold now, which can be a little more complicated because you have a lot of hoses here. For the heater core, you have a lot of stuff that's going to be attached still. So you might pull the manifold off and be like, why is it still hooked up? You have a PCV hose you got to worry about when you're taking that off. Of course, fuel lines are cut. I removed all the emission stuff off the back here, but that's pretty straightforward. So I'll go over some coolant lines to watch out for as you're taking the bottom of the manifold off and things like that. All right, so as far as the plenum goes, you have these 2 12mm nuts, and there's some a little more hard to reach ones down in here. You got a bolt there, another bolt there, and one more bolt in the back. You can reach these with an extension. You might need a universal joint to get to them. But it's just those 5. So you're going to take those off, and that will free the plenum up. We're also going to remove the throttle body, and you're going to have various coolant lines that, if your engine's out at this point, most of them will be disconnected. But again, if you plan on keeping a lot of these, like we're going to get rid of the throttle body lines. We don't need those. You can just disconnect them wherever they are and just make a note of where they were going. There's the throttle body. You have 4 6mm Allen heads, and then this plug here that's going to be zip tied to one of your intake hoses. You can undo the zip tie with a little tab right there. You just push up on that little tab, undo the zip tie. Of course, you're going to have maybe a coolant line or 2 you have to disconnect. Then you just pull that right off, and that's going to use a paper gasket here. So at some point, you're going to have to make sure the surface is nice and clean. So we got the plenum off, PCV hose here, you want to watch out for that guy. This is the throttle body hose, and there's some other stuff that runs like all over the place. There's another, it's hard to see, you can get in there. This coolant passage right here snakes up and goes to the plenum. So you can disconnect it from down here, you can disconnect it from the top, whatever. I cut it because we don't need it. So you can take care of that. Next, we're just going to pull off the fuel rail, pretty straightforward. We got 2 12mm bolts holding it in, and then you're just gonna pop these off with some O-rings. Of course, watch out for fuel coming out. And we're gonna hold on to this and get rid of these hoses because you should replace all of these rubber lines when you go to put the engine back together. Those fuel lines are gonna be dry. You wanna use a razor blade to cut them off, but don't cut yourself open. Of course, you want to hold on to this. This is your little bridge between the fuel rail soft lines and the soft lines that go down to the fuel filter. So I did have to cut these off, these old fuel hoses off with a razor blade. They're just so stuck on there, there's no other way. So you cut those guys off, 2 12mm bolts, and then this thing literally just pulls out. The injectors just sit down with little O-rings in the intake runners here.
These things look crusty.
And then you can pull each injector out of the fuel rail.
Ooh,
a little bit of fuel. And I'm going to send these out to get rebuilt. And of course, we'll get all new seals for them. You have some O-rings. You have a seal for the top. You have a seal for the bottom. These might get stuck inside the intake manifold, so watch out for that. And then a little pintle cap. So I'm going to send these out to get rebuilt, and we'll have a fresh new injectors to go back in this engine. And now we're going to take the lower intake manifold off. So you have a handful of 12mm bolts and nuts. You have these two that run through and bolt into the cylinder head. You have a nut there, two 12s in the middle, and you have this hidden one I was talking about earlier. If your power steering pump is on, you're not going to see that, and you're not going to be able to get to it. That's the last one, so just take that off with a 12mm wrench, and this whole thing comes off, and as we're taking it off, we'll go over the various coolant hoses and things like that that are going to be underneath here that you want to look out for as you're removing it. Alright, so I did have to give this a couple whacks with a hammer right here to break it loose from the paper gasket. You just kind of gonna have to give it a little shimmy to get it off, wiggle it off the studs. Once you start getting it off, you'll see it's pretty stuck because you have this hose right here that's holding it on, and you also have this hose that runs back to the heater core. So you can disconnect these two either once you got it hanging here or while it's still on the studs. You're just gonna have to get those two off. And I also want to make a note about, I'm gonna grab me one of those long bolts over there. These are the bolts that go through right here into the cylinder head. I've never had one break, but they are longer, so you want to be careful when you're taking them out, just to make sure you're not putting too much torque on them. I wouldn't run them out with an impact gun, just break them loose by hand, get a good feel for them, make sure they're not going to break before you take them out.
She's rotated.
Alright, so now that the intake manifold's off, we got a lot more room to play with here. All that's really left is the right side engine mount bracket, the oil filter housing, one of the heater core hoses, which I'm going to end up just bypassing the heater core, because my car doesn't have one. We have the factory, kind of like an air oil separator here. This would run up to your PCV valve on the intake manifolds. And then we have the whole timing cover portion here with this coolant outlet and this other coolant hose that would go onto the intake manifold. So we're going to start tearing all this stuff down, and then we will be ready to remove the oil pan and the cylinder head. You're going to want to hold on to this, and I'm going to see if I can find a replacement for this, because while it is old and cracked, you have to use a molded hose to replace it. While you still have the oil filter housing on here, not a bad idea to remove the oil pressure switch with an adjustable wrench. So the factory air oil separator here that runs up to your PCV valve, it's going to be 3 10mm bolts. It goes right into the side of the timing cover here. So you can totally reuse these on pretty much any application, even a track car. But you can also get or even make your own plate that bolts right here with either an AN fitting or just a bung to run a hose to a ventilated catch can, which is very well what I might do. So we'll take it off, we'll hold on to it, but chances are pretty good I'll end up putting a plate on here so I can run a hose directly to my catch can and just bypass this whole thing. This is right on the side of the timing cover, and that runs to your heater core inlet. So just gonna have to tap it off. It's held on with RTV. Tap it off with a mallet. So the crankshaft pulley bolt is a 1 1/16 or a 27mm. You hit that with an impact and it should come off pretty easily. If you don't hit it with an impact, you're gonna have to find a way to hold the engine and break it loose with a breaker bar. These crank pulleys, sometimes they can be stuck on there, sometimes they're not. It seems like it wants to come off, so we're gonna try 2 screwdrivers and just work it back and forth, try to get it off the nose of the crankshaft. When you do break this loose, make sure not to lose the keyway that's in there, and I'll show you that once we get it off.
That's too easy, man.
There it is.
Yeah. The keyway here.
Keyway's inside there, so we'll just keep an eye on that when we go to pull the timing cover off. But there is your crankshaft pulley / damper. Pretty straightforward. We'll put that off to the side for now. So there it is. There's the engine fully stripped down to a long block, obviously minus the oil pump and oil pan, but that's all the accessories and everything else removed. Next, we're going to take the valve cover off and get the front timing cover off. All right, next is the oil pump. It's just going to be 4 12mm bolts that hold it onto the timing cover. So we're going to pop that off now, and it's probably going to spill a lot of oil out. We'll see. All right, so these 2 bolts came loose without a problem, but when I started to break this one loose, I felt it stretching and not turning. You could actually see up here that it wasn't turning. So what I decided to do was get the impact. You can do this with a 3/8 impact, or this is a 1/2 inch on a low torque setting, and get a long socket and an extension on here. And what you want to do is just get on there and just lightly shake it up. As you see the bolt start to move, you want to work it back and forth. So you loosen it a little bit, tighten it a little bit, loosen it a little bit. I think this one's still stuck inside the bore here because it's not wanting to come out, but it's definitely out of the threads. So just work it for a little while as it starts to come out. You definitely don't want to break these because then you got to get them out of the timing cover. Going? All right, so we did a little bit of foreshadowing earlier, and we got 2 of the bolts out. The one we were able to extract using that impact method. You just kind of hammer on it for a little while and start to work it, but you can see just how corroded these threads get up in there. So the problem isn't so much that, but the bolt has a tendency to break right here above the head. And so, is it focusing? No.
It's all right, we can get
the
idea.
Yeah, it started to bend a little bit here. The other one, unfortunately, we weren't so lucky. That one did break off right below the head. So that's what we have left of it, which is great as far as extracting the remaining piece of the bolt goes. The problem is that bolt runs all the way up through the oil pump, and that's where it's stuck. So what we did was put a whole lot of heat into that area where that stud is, and we're replacing this oil pump. So we started just beating on it here until it began to come loose. You beat on it here, do a little bit of prying on this side until it starts to come loose, and now it's going. But you have to get this out before you take off the timing cover. So in hindsight, try your best to not break the bolts. Use as much heat as you can while you're taking them out, and try to use that method of hammering them with the impact just to loosen everything up. Worst case scenario, if they do break, this is probably the route you're going to have to go. Use a whole lot of heat. The oil actually started boiling out of this thing. And then just hammer and pry it off until it starts to come loose. All right, so after enough heat and beating with the hammer, I finally got this thing out. The issue, of course, was that the remaining part of the bolt that's still stuck in the timing cover here was stuck inside of the oil pump, and so trying to hammer this thing off of that was the main objective. You got this shaft here that drives the distributor, so you want to hold on to that. And then this whole oil pump unit, you can still get new from Hitachi, so that's what we're going to do. We're going to replace that. When you're taking it off, you want to be careful not to pry, because this is a machine surface. You do not want to mess this surface up here. Same goes for the oil pump if you're reusing it. So that's really it. We're going to get that stud out of there, and then we're going to go on to pulling the front cover and the oil pan. Alright, so now that you got your engine turned upside down without making a massive mess, be careful because you will get oil out of the cylinder head where it's all pulled up, and you will also get it coming out of the oil pump hole in the timing cover. So once you got it flipped over, we're going to move on to the oil pan. Bunch of 10mm bolts. Again, with these, if you have a rusty engine that's been sitting for a long time like this one, be careful not to break them. They don't usually break, but still something to look out for. So we're going to go ahead and pop that off real quick, and we'll get back with you. So, I think we found what happened to our timing chain guide. It is in a bunch of little tiny pieces here in the oil pan. I see some flakes here as well, so could be something else going on in here. So we're gonna have to keep on digging and find out what's going on.
I'm trying to flash that on the specs again.
Yeah.
That's crazy.
Look at that.
Nice and zoomed in.
Yep.
Well, that's where that guide went.
That's where that guide went. We're gonna keep on digging and see what we find. Alright, so we got the engine back upright after removing the oil pan. And now we're going to remove the dipstick tube and the timing cover. So once we get the timing cover off, what we're going to do, because that guide was missing, is we're going to make sure this engine is still in time and it didn't skip a tooth or anything like that. It's very odd that that chain guide broke off. It's not something I've seen before, and as far as I'm aware, not a common issue with these engines. So we're going to see maybe the tensioner failed, the chain slapped around, broke the guide off, who knows. Alright, so we just removed a handful of 10 and 12 millimeter bolts. There's 4 up here that bolt the front part of the cylinder cover, cylinder head to the timing cover. 1, 2, 3, and 4. We have 3 12 millimeter bolts right here, 2 long 10s, another 12 millimeter, 1 more 12 millimeter up here. There's these 2 10s that we removed earlier for the upper alternator bracket, and then there's 1 more 10 millimeter hiding down here behind where the oil pump would have been. So once you get those off, you might have to do a little bit of prying, a little bit of hammering with a mallet to get this thing off because it's stuck on there with RTV. So we're going to do that and we'll get back to it. Alright, so we got the timing cover off here. It was a lot easier than I was expecting. Just a couple hits with the mallet and it came off. Once it's off now, we can see there's another piece of our timing guide. And there's 1 more piece here, still on the block, hanging out down below the tensioner and that shoe. So this is where the guide would have been originally. You can see part of it's still actually hanging out here on the top. So again, we're going to go through here and we're going to check the timing on this engine, make sure it didn't skip a tooth or anything like that. And then we'll continue on with removing the tensioner and the shoe, and then the upper sprocket and the chain.
Look at this, though. This is crazy.
Oh, yeah. Still a little bit left in there. And this is where that
guide grenaded itself.
Oh, yeah. This is where the oil pump shaft goes through, and you can see how it goes all the way up, and it drives your distributor up here.
Yeah. Look at that hole right there.
Yep. So this is actually a huge problem here. We might actually need a new timing cover.
That's wild.
The chain rubbed through on this coolant passage for the water pump here, and if I'm not mistaken, it actually rubbed all the way through into that coolant passage.
Wow.
So chances are pretty good, unless I can weld that up, we're going to need a new timing cover. Time to take off the timing chain. This is the lower mount for the chain guide, and you can see the chain was actually wearing into it, just in the way it was wearing into the timing cover. So that thing must have been flapping around like crazy. Here is the upper part of the timing chain. It completely broke off. Crazy stuff. Some people will ask me why I decide to continue using the single cam. Some people even joke that I'll be the last person on earth with this engine in my car. And the main reason for me is just simplicity. You can see as we've been tearing this thing down, it's really, really a simple engine, especially if you compare it to the dual cam, which is the alternative, because SR20s are just not feasible anymore. So when it comes to single cam versus dual cam, we're talking about a difference of 15 horsepower in their stock form, which can be made up for with either driver mod or changing the final drive out, or even some basic modifications which we might do when we reassemble this to try to get closer to that 155 number, just to make this thing a little more enjoyable on the track. But these engines are incredibly simple compared to dual cams especially. You have one single timing chain, you have a single chain tensioner and shoe, and of course you have the guide that's supposed to be here, as opposed to the dual cams, 2 timing chain setup, 2 tensioners, and then of course you have the guides that are prone to failing up on the upper timing chain. And on top of that too, you have very simple rocker arm mechanisms here. You have hydraulic lifters, which are prone to getting stuck, generally not an issue if the car is well taken care of. And you have a single camshaft. There's really very little to go wrong here as far as longevity, maintenance, and running the engine on track are concerned. My previous engine had 204,000 miles before I money shifted it and blew the engine up. It probably would have gone even farther. So just are very durable engines, very simple, very easy to work on. And really, they're still cheap. There's no reason to change what works. So I opt for the single cam as opposed to the dual cam. Just a much, much simpler engine, much more robust. And we'll show you even more on the bottom end as we begin to take that apart, how robust the bottom end is. All right, so now that our timing chain is out of the way, we're going to take the cylinder head off. It's going to be 10 14 millimeter bolts, and get on over here, don't be shy. You're going to want to remove them in a crisscross pattern starting on the outside. Otherwise, you could risk warping the cylinder head. So we're going to start here with 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, so on and so forth until you get to the center too. They recommend removing them or loosening them in stages. So just kind of crack them loose and do a little bit at a time, again, starting on the outside, working your way in a crisscross pattern. So we're going to get that off and get it off of the block, and we'll show you what's going on. The cylinder head is off. Before we look at the cylinder head, I want to take a look at the block here. Some interesting stuff going on. Gelatinous coolant paste, whatever you would like to call that. So that's really interesting. That's something right there. And this was also in one of the coolant jackets.
I pulled it out of there.
A little
it was
bit of
just
RTV.
bunched up right there.
So this is going to be an interesting one. This engine could have had some overheating going on. Who knows, really? We're going to have to do a lot of measuring once everything's cleaned up and figure out if we have any warpage or any problems like that. And once this block and head get sent off to the machine shop, make sure that they are cleaned out thoroughly. So all these coolant and oil jackets are completely cleaned out. Just really interesting. I don't know where that would have came from. I don't know if we can make the shape out of it, like a silly band or something, but really, really odd here that a piece of RTV ended up finding its way into the cooling jacket like that.
Like a silly band is crazy.
That's really strange.
That's just wild.
We're gonna pull this head gasket off, clean up what we can.
Literally completely blocked up.
Yeah, fortunately, my fear was, we checked earlier if the engine was still in time, and it was. So we didn't have any valve contact with cylinder 3 as far as causing an issue with that valve seat there. So we'll go back and we'll inspect that, and we'll see why, if we can figure out that exhaust valve's leaking. But fortunately, it did not hit the piston. It's not bent as far as we know. It could just be burnt, cracked. Maybe the valve seat's got too much carbon on it. Who knows? We'll find out. All right, so while the PB blaster sits in the dipstick tube and soaks, we'll try to get that out later, we are going to pull off the oil strainer. We're going to remove each piston, and then we're going to remove the girdle and the crankshaft. And then that'll be pretty much it as far as the teardown goes. We'll make some separate videos regarding the cylinder head here, taking out the rocker shafts and the camshaft. Upon initial inspection, I didn't see anything wrong with that number 3 exhaust valve, but we'll end up pulling everything out and sending it all off to the machine shop, and it'll all get redone anyways. So we're going to get right to stripping down the short block here. All right, the oil strainer is going to be 2 12 millimeters on this side where the tube connects to the block, and then one 10mm here for the reinforcement arm that connects to the girdle. So we're going to pop that off real quick, and then we'll begin pulling the pistons out. Now we're going to move on to pulling the pistons out. So that's going to be two 14mm nuts holding on each cap. We'll remove the cap, and then we'll push the piston down out through the bottom of the block and catch it before it falls in my makeshift oil tray here. Caps are numbered. They are split caps, so you have to make sure the cap goes on the same way it came off. Each cap and rod, this will be really tough to see, are stamped. They say, you can see it there, 4 and 4, so you know which way to orient them. It can't go the other way around, it has to go this way. Alright, now that the pistons are out, we're down to the final step. So we're going to remove this girdle here. Come on over. We remove this girdle here, which has all 5 main caps integrated into it. And we can take that up and pull the crankshaft out. But I want to touch on real quick, another thing that makes the KA so great, this is not exclusive to this engine, but it does make it great, is this main crankshaft girdle here. So as opposed to having individual main caps for the crankshaft, you have all of the main caps built into this one piece right here. So what this does is it strengthens the block by adding a brace essentially right here. And it also spreads the load out from each main journal on the crankshaft all the way across here instead of having one individual main cap for each. So this makes the bottom end of these engines really strong. If you want to go turbocharged or anything like that, these bottom ends are good for a pretty decent amount of horsepower, 400 or 500 horsepower even on some builds. We're staying basically stock, but this just means this engine is even more robust in stock form, and you're really never going to see a failure down here unless you have an oiling problem. So I want to touch on real quick before we remove the crankshaft here. You have 3 key ways you want to make sure you remove and do not lose. You have the first one, which is for the balancer. The second one here, which is going to be for the oil pump and distributor drive. And there's going to be a third one underneath this timing chain sprocket.
Taking off the crankshaft girdle.
So, just like you would do with the rod bearings and the rod journals on the crankshaft, you want to go through and look for any kind of scoring or large pieces even possibly missing from the journals. Mainly just looking for anything that you might feel with your fingernails. These all look, both the main and the rod journals, very smooth. Same goes for the bearings here. These are just the lower bearings, but really no signs of contamination, which is really good. No scoring or anything. We have very smooth and even wear all throughout here. So overall, it looks like the engine's in pretty good health. We shouldn't need to have anything done to the crankshaft. We should be able to just put new bearings in and go ahead when we go to put the bottom end back together. So yeah, that's it. We're going to have to end up pulling this piece off here to the rear main seal plate to get the crankshaft all the way out. But that's pretty much the extent of it. To get the crankshaft all the way out, we're going to have to take off the rear main seal plate here. Not the easiest thing to get off with it's on the engine stand, but it's manageable. It is going to be 6 10mm bolts. You take those all out, and then you're going to have to gently beat this off of here because it's held on with RTV. So once you wiggle that off of there, you can pull the crankshaft all the way out, and that's going to be it. That'll be the engine fully torn down to the bare engine block. So that was the teardown of the KA24E. This might end up being a 2 or even 3-part video. We'll see once I get to editing everything. But thank you for tuning in and watching us go through this whole process. I hope it wasn't too terrible for you.
I am Ryan. It's Aidan behind the camera there. You can follow me on Instagram at RYNCPK. And you can follow Aidan at _UginX. I'll be posting some videos about the car, about some of my other cars as well, another upcoming project I'll have in the spring, and then some shorts here and there about putting this engine back together. So again, thanks for tuning in, thanks for watching, and hope to see you in the next few videos where we start to tear down the cylinder head, and we're also going to go over cleaning up the lower and upper intake manifolds there, simplifying those and getting them all ready to go back on the car, cleaning everything up like that. So we will get this sent all off to the machine shop after that's teared down, and then we'll be on to reassembly. So thanks for watching.